Welcome. Welcome to this 8th edition of our EY Women in Tech webcast series. I'm very proud to be hosting this webcast today. The feedback and the engagement to the first 7 edition has been very powerful and important and so rich of valuable conversation. I'm sure that today, once again, we will have the chance to talk together on such topics that are so relevant for all of us. Before starting, let me introduce myself. My name is Raffaella Mele. I'm a tech leader in EY based in Italy. I have more than 25 years of experience in financial services, and I'm helping our clients in transforming their footprint in the market with the help of technology. Let me set the scene for our webcast today in terms of agenda, and in particular, let me introduce the amazing panel we have today with us. Which is the topic for today? Empowering women in technology, choosing the right path for career success. We selected 3 main pillars that we want to deep dive, and asking to our great leaders, great guests to share real experience and their thoughts on this point. How to manage specialist versus generalist choosing during the early stage of the career, how to develop the leadership skills alongside the deeper technology aspect, and how our personal skills on top of the hard skills can really impact our career choices. Let me say that the guests we have today have all an impressive CVs, so not able for me to touch all the backgrounds they have, but for the audience, look at the bottom of the screen. You can find a dedicated icon you can click on and find the complete bios of our guests. Let's start with Nina Mohanty. Nina is a co-founder and CEO of Blue Money, an app that builds tools for diaspora community to build generational wealth. Nina is recognized on Forbes 30 under 30 Europe list under the finance category. Let me welcome Lilia Christofi, join us from Microsoft, where she is the EMEA banking lead, with more than 20 years of experiences in consulting, both in public and private sectors across continents. She led and managed large team as a CIO and FSI EMEA customer transformation leader. And we are delighted to have Shivani Baghel with us, a senior program manager at Klarna. She sits in the advisory board of Rise Up and Money 2020. Unfortunately, one of our speakers, Orla Dunne, is unwell, so not able to join, but we have a lot of leaders here, so we can start the discussion. I have to ask the help of the audience. Please use the chat to pose your questions. I'll do my best to keep them in the discussion to enrich the conversation. And please click again at the bottom of the screen, you can find another dedicated icon to complete the survey. It's important for us to collect your feedback and suggestion, also to arrange the incoming, the next webcast we will arrange in the incoming weeks. So we set some initial questions for the ladies around the table. First round, we said we have two possible paths for our career, so generalist and specialist. Nina, I want to start with you. Thinking about the early part of a career in tech, I'm interested in, and I'm sure the audience is as well, to get your perspective on how should an individual approach this stage with regard the two mentioned path, generalist and specialist?
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant question, and I think sorry, I've got like a bit of a sun glare here, so trying to change the video around. It kind of depends on what I think, in my own opinion, what you want to achieve longer term. I think I should start by saying that I also never expected to have a career in fintech. I landed in fintech completely by accident. So I was kind of presented this opportunity, which at the time MasterCard was hiring. I mean, it was very early days for the first wave of fintech, if you want to call it that, when Monzo was Mondo and Starling was just starting out and Revolut was just starting out. And at the time, I thought MasterCard was a bank, which obviously they're not. And frankly, I just needed a job. So that's why I took the role at MasterCard. And it was more of a, I need this job right now, so I'll kind of put it there for now, do as best I can, and then see what happens. But as is often the case, that first role really sets you up for your career. And at the time, it had never occurred to me that, I'm going to be a payments expert specifically, or that I was going to be an expert in card schemes. And it really, for me, I think boils down to your motivations, and what fuels you, what keeps you going. So for me, one of the things I've noticed, and people kind of look at my CV sometimes and can be a bit snarky about it, because I've spent a year and a half in some places, I've spent 2 years in some places, but not very long, across various different places and employers. And for me, that's often because what motivates me is learning. I want to learn as much as I can, as quickly as I can. And what I found in my early career was that by moving roles, I got to learn a lot. Perhaps I actually should have pursued a career in consulting, because then I would have had opportunity to try many different things and many different projects as well. But that's kind of been my motivator. And that's why I think I have ended up being a generalist. I started at MasterCard. I then went on and worked at Starling Bank, helped launch the current account at Starling Bank, went to Bud, which is an open banking platform, then went to Klarna, which is known for buy now, pay later, and then now I'm a founder. And so there's not really any cohesion to that story. It's gone from B2B to B2C to B2B and back to B2C, all over the place. I think when people think of me, they kind of think fintech generalist. Sometimes people will come to me as an expert in open banking. Sometimes they'll come to me as an expert in buy now, pay later. Sometimes they'll come to me as an expert in payments. But I would say I am definitely not a specialist or expert in any particular space, but have that wider view. And I think that has served me well. I didn't ever think I was going to become a founder. Believe it or not, it was never a dream of mine. I never set out and said, I'm going to become an entrepreneur, I'm going to found a fintech company. I really founded Bloom out of necessity, because I was so frustrated that it wasn't being built. But that generalist approach throughout my career has really helped me thrive as a founder so far. Well, we'll see. And there's a lot of different bits and pieces that I've had to learn along the way. But having a bit of knowledge from all of those different aspects of fintech more broadly has really served me well. And I think more than anything, it was just, am I learning? Am I happy? Am I still growing my skills? And that's not to say you can't do that as a specialist, but I think it's more about going deeper as opposed to wider in what you learn. So that's kind of how I think about the specialist versus generalist choice.
Thank you, Nina, for this interesting story and perspective. Now, I need your help, Lilia, for the next question. Which action, in your opinion, can individuals put in place if they realize that they want to shift from one path to the other? This is something that happened also to me.
I'd love to share also my experience around this topic, and it's very different, I guess, to Nina's, having been in consulting for over 8 years. And I think the answer is very different depending on which industry and which part of the different types of organizations in our macroeconomy you're working on. So as a generalist, in terms of working in consulting, that is viable, I think, up to a point. When you get to about senior manager, you need to build a brand and a purpose and for what people know you for. And that, I think, is driven by two things. One is where revenue might come from to generate your business case for growth within the partnership. And the second is for what you drive passion for. And that, I think, you can combine. But it is important, for example, if I look at my career, when I was in consulting, I was up to senior manager, a generalist. At senior manager, I actually started doing all the infrastructure strategies across Australia. And then, and that was cross industry. And it was very specialized. It's still strategy, touches on many, many different facets of technology, and it's quite broad, but it is in the infrastructure space. And then over time, as we see the evolution of the requirements around data and AI, I grew a passion in AI. And then I built my purpose and my reason around that, and was known for the AI leader, in that continent to drive a AI strategy. And the way I went about that is a couple of things. One was you got to think of it as your own business and enterprise. Frankly, at the end of the day, you yourself as a person are your own business, irrespective of whether you work in a consultancy or you work for an organization like Microsoft or you work within a bank. And the thing is, you carry a title which you formulate in some cases where there's no real, prescription around that, because you are a consultant, for example, in some cases, and in other cases, you might have a broad remit. And what you want to be known for is, like, if you set up your shop on a road, let's say I set up a bakery, you're going to put up a sign. That's the first indicator that you're in for business. This is the business you're in. I'm a baker. So that's your sign. Your signage and your postage and the way you advertise yourself and market yourself is important. Where you advertise and market yourself is important. So, for example, now I'm very big on AI. It aligns to Microsoft's agenda. I do a lot of panel talks around AI. I represent Microsoft in the AI space within the EMEA community. So anywhere where I work with either partners, it may be direct to customer. These are the topics that I engage on. So people know me for that in terms of my brand. And just like anything, there is a balance between, how you market yourself and what you would give as free offering to kind of test your ability to deliver against the services that you've committed to, and your knowledge around that. So you have to be part of a community who's already doing that work. And you form your network around that. So then is it something niche within that specialization that you're actually knowledgeable about, or you're also a generalist within the specialization, which is also an interesting concept to unpack. And then you realize where you're lacking in knowledge, but also where your passion lies, because everywhere you go, you test and learn. Whether you're a generalist or a specialist, you're always testing and learning and continuously evolving. And that doesn't mean that tomorrow you might not find something completely different to do. But it's what you market yourself for the time that you're doing it. And by the way, to get enough branding and purpose within a particular area takes a good 2 to 3 years. So this is not something you do really short term. You've got to go at it for quite a while. Just like if you think about a business and its peaks and troughs, it's the same thing around your purpose and your brand. And I've experienced that in my career as well.
Thank you, Lilia. I'm sure, I believe that the people attending the webcast can really relate on these words you spent with us. Back to Nina again. Nina, we understood that technology was not your first rodeo. So let's deep dive a little bit because we want to understand better which were the personal choices for you, being a specialist or generalist, and let us understand a little bit better what was the beginning of your career and how you came to be in technology.
Yeah, I think we all kind of come to it in different ways. I will preface that actually I started my career in civil service. So it's actually ironic because I was born and raised in the Silicon Valley, and both of my parents were dot-com boom engineers. And so actually even my younger brother is an engineer. So I'm the black sheep of the family. I'm the only one that can't write a line of code. And they actually to this day make fun of me all the time. Like if I get nominated for a Woman in Tech award, they are always laughing at me because they're like, you can't even write a line of code. How can you be a woman in tech? I think that is a very important distinction to make or conversation to have, because I think oftentimes when we talk about technology, about STEM fields more broadly, we assume that you have to be an engineer. You have to be, writing code or actually building something if you're, working in science or doing research in a lab or whatever it might be. But what I have found is that there are a lot of engineering adjacent roles. And I think that's why I kind of feel uncomfortable sometimes calling myself a woman working in tech, but at the same time, everything is tech now too, right? Like we live in a world where there is not a company that is not using technology in some way. So everyone is a tech company at this point. Even, your local coffee shop is using fintech for processing payments, right? And for managing their inventory. So everything is tech related these days. It's just to what extent are they engaged with technology and how deep is the technology perhaps? For me, I did come from this background of having these engineers in my household. I thought I was going to be a diplomat. And so I entered the civil service. I was working for the Obama administration. That's what brought me here to London. And as I said, falling into fintech was completely by accident. It was purely by way of needing a job at the time. And it was there at that moment. So I was very lucky in that regard where this opportunity presented itself to me. I think the really interesting thing, and something that I hold to be very true and important today, more so than ever, is I'm sure you've all been hearing about generative AI and the rise of AI and what does this mean for us as humans working in technology. And I firmly believe that it is the skills that are not hard engineering that are actually still going to be valuable in 10, 20 years' time. So to give you an example, people who are working in tech sales, for example, who can explain that, this is what the technology does broadly. They don't, the end customer might not care. Again, to use that example of the coffee shop, they might not actually care what the payment processing, how it works, how quick it is necessarily. They just want to be able to accept payments, right? And so if you're working in that tech sales in vertical, then you can, as long as you can explain to the mom and pop shop owner what they will be able to achieve and why, and for, you know, why it's better than anything else, then that is still a tech adjacent role that is very, very valuable, that maybe an engineer would not be as skillful as at doing. I think actually I'd love to hear from Shivani, because I know that she does program management at Klarna, and I had so much respect when I worked at Klarna for program managers, for product managers, because they are the people who make sure that the trains run on time. You know, they're the ones corralling engineers and getting them all in one room, getting the marketing team together, getting all of the stakeholders together. These are things that AI cannot replace. These are things that an engineer on their own cannot necessarily do. And you'll even find that oftentimes, I have found with many of my friends who are engineers, as they progress in their career, if you think about the structure of corporate structures, actually, the more you are in an engineering field, if you start to rise to the top, you're not writing code anymore. You're managing people, right? You're managing teams. You're trying to get the best out of your team, and that is a people skill. So I think it's sometimes unfair when we just assume that tech has to be coding and that you have to learn how to do Python or anything like that. Obviously, it helps to get your foot in the door, but I have a much more broad philosophy, I suppose, towards tech than maybe the average person.
Thanks, Nina. So welcome to Shivani. You have been mentioned, so it's your turn now. Please help me with some question from the audience. The point is it ever too late to change your mind in terms of your career, ambitions, and aspiration in the technology space?
Hi, thanks, Raffaella, for this question. It's a wonderful question, right? And it's a cliche to answer a question with a question. Is it ever too late for anything? I think no. The simple answer is no, it's never too late. In fact, if we are thinking about changing some things, tweaking some things, or rethinking our ambition, where we are headed, it reflects that we are learning, it reflects that we are growing, and it reflects that we are open to changing our mindset, right? And I also want to acknowledge this Women in Tech, this 8th series of webcasts is happening at a very interesting time, right? We are in an atmosphere where the current geopolitics influences us to maybe say, oh, we are privileged enough. Let's be okay with what we have right now, because maybe so many other people in different parts of the world don't have the kind of careers we already have. Are we asking for too much, right? And I would like, my message would be to say, no, we've got to stay courageous. I think the world demands a lot of us to have courage, and to have courage is to be fully alive. And ambition itself is quite an interesting thing, right? We have this stereotypical idea of ambition that is usually sold to us in a very aggressive form of ambition. And let me illustrate it with a personal story. I am a typical South Asian kid, born and brought up in India. I've been given this message that, hey, you can do it all, you can have all the opportunities. And I also want to highlight that often when I'm in these panels, there is this notion maybe in the audience to say, hey, maybe she's born with some current kind of right privileges to be where we are, right? Some of us might have, like, all these speakers that are coming and are leaders within industry come from a certain privilege, and people maybe from let's say a non-typical privileged background might think that, hey, can we have what these people have? So I want to highlight that I come from, I'm actually an immigrant in Europe. I'm a successful, highly paid immigrant, so I'm called an expat. And my life story has been, you gotta succeed, you gotta be this, you gotta have to have like this glorious career. But I'm rethinking what ambition means for me. And I'm not buying in the stereotypical ambition within the tech industry. So and something that I would like to dwell deeper into, some of the people asked, hey, if we want to switch a role within the tech industry, and if we want to um, explore different paths, what does that mean for us, right? So for me, ambition right now, typically it started as I want to be a CEO or a CXO of a company, but I'm saying no, that's not my ambition anymore. Like Nina said, she didn't set out to be a founder. Her journey got her there. My journey is taking me in a direction of building portfolio careers. I'm realizing that tech is one part of contributing to the world, but there are so many other different parts to contribute, right? I've written my first book. I've chosen, I have not had any formal studies somebody said, hey, when is it to, I've been reading these wonderful questions that have been popping in, and somebody asked, hey, when is the right time to like go study or do something, or if you want to build a new skill, when to do that, right? And and just my personal story is, you can build these skills parallelly and formal. You don't need an approval of formal studies to do that. So I am setting out on my ambition has changing. So I'm saying that I'm not too late to be an author, and I'm saying that I don't need to go through a literary background or literary studies to do that. So that's where I would be. I would be like, it's never too late to rethink ambition, and even your notion of ambition should be personalized. Don't buy into the typical success and what is being corporate commercial success that is sold to us. There are so many different directions and parallel fields that we can have.
Thank you, Shivani, for having shared so important personal experience. Thanks, really. Let's move ahead on the agenda. If you remember, we have the second pillar we want to discuss that is about leadership skills, so important when we growing up in the ranks in our organization. And the first question is for Nina. You shared that you experienced a lot of roles in different organizations, so I'm sure that the importance of the takeaway from each of these experience relevant to shape what you are today. And today you are the CEO of an important startup, but you are in this role at an early stage in everyone's career. So let me understand, how did you manage shifting from being part of a team to leading an organization?
Oh, yeah, that is a really great question, and something that I'm still trying to figure out every day. Our audience is mostly women, I believe, correct? So I think there are many different viewpoints of what female leadership looks like. I think I was a big fan of 80s and 90s films growing up, and my mom obviously was working in the 80s in the US, and I remember like the big shoulder pads, and like, you know, in all those movies the women are wearing big shoulder pads and like kind of dressing a lot like men. And so there's this one type of female leadership which shows up kind of like act like a man, and be like a man and be a man at the table, but just you happen to be a woman. And this is something that never really appealed to me, not least because I don't look good with boxy shouldered blazers. The other is kind of a more nurturing approach, and that's probably what I fall into. I think one thing is I happen to have a master's degree in management, and this was, again, not because I was like, oh, I'm going to get this degree so that I can climb the ladder necessarily. It was actually because I had a lot of curiosity on business management more broadly, how to motivate people, incentivize people, and that sort of thing. But what is really interesting to me is, and what I've probably learned the most from, is from my day-to-day interactions as a professional in this space. I'm sure we have all had experiences, whether good or bad, on various teams, often bad experiences, where you kind of make a mental note and you think to yourself, like, if I'm ever someone's boss, I'm not going to do that, right? I remember one time I came back from a trip to Nairobi in Kenya, and I had to go straight to hospital, actually, and they thought that I might have malaria. So I was in hospital for a week, and I remember my boss at the time WhatsApped me and said, "You're probably still in Kenya. You're probably not sick at all. And you just wanted to extend your trip." And I remember, like, to this day, I remember that text message. And so that when I think about now at Bloom, a lot of the policies that we have duvet days, where it's like, no need to explain to me why you need the day off. You just take the day off. If it's a bad mental health day, if you have a really bad period, if you just need to step away from your laptop for the day, like, no questions asked. There's this kind of, my approach has been, that was such an awful experience that I, as a leader, marked that in my head and noted it, and never wanted to do the same thing and make someone else feel the way that my boss had made me feel. So a lot of it is kind of, what do I like from other people's leadership styles? What don't I like? And what do I want it to be? How do I want that to show up as a leader now? I think the other really interesting thing is we have this double-edged sword as women, where I think many of us have a superpower of connecting with people. We actually care, probably, about our teams, about our employees. And I actually have a Post-it note up on my wall right in front of me. Actually, I'm looking at it right now. And my romantic partner had to write down on a Post-it note for me, "You are their boss, not their friend. You are their boss, not their friend." And this was something that was really difficult for me to navigate, especially at the early stage, when you're working long hours with people all the time, and you have this propensity to become very pally. Everyone's following each other on Instagram. Like, the lines of professionalism start to blur quite quickly. And I'm sure that's the case as well in a high stress environment like consulting as well, where you're working long hours on a project and you kind of bond together over gallows humor or whatever. And this was something that I had to make a conscious effort to move away from, which was, you can be kind, you can be friendly, but you are not their friend. You are their boss. At the end of the day, I'm responsible for keeping the lights on. I'm responsible for making sure that they get paid. So, like, I have personal preferences where I do not follow any of the team except for my co-founder, because we go back as friends, but I don't follow anyone on Instagram. That's like a very clear delineation for me, that we don't blur those lines. We do birthdays, but I actually try not to ever message anyone on WhatsApp. I try not to message anyone outside of working hours. I mean, I will Slack them or email them, and those are mediums which I think are appropriate to use. But I think it's something that I had to be very conscious of, because as a female leader, and I've spoken to many other female leaders about this, there becomes this assumption that, oh, you're kind of like mom, or you're one of us, you're our friend, and that starts to erode the authority that you have. So there's a lot of it that is just trial and error. A lot of it is speaking to other female leaders. I'm a work in progress every day. I'm learning from leaders much smarter and successful than I am. And I look to a lot of mentors in the industry as well. Like, I have a whole bunch of founders that are on WhatsApp, incidentally, who I can text and say, this thing happened, I didn't really like how it worked out, or I have to have this difficult conversation, or heaven forbid, I have to let someone go. How do I go about that? But these are things that we know is our superpower. I mean, just yesterday, I don't know if you know Carta. It's like this equity management software that a lot of startups use. there was a huge expose on their CEO, Henry Ward, that came out, and it was saying like what a toxic environment it was to work at Carta, where they have multiple discrimination and sexual harassment lawsuits coming towards the company over the past 2 decades, right? And we've seen things like Revolut is struggling to fix their culture. They like part of the FCA wanting or withholding a bank license is questions on the culture at Revolut. So these are things that, yes, you can move fast and break things, you can raise a lot of money, but at the end of the day, a business is a business. You have to manage people. And so I think this is our
business is business. Thank you, Nina. In building our career, the relationship are crucial. So, Lilia, how do you break through the real or perceived barriers in creating powerful and natural relationship with the senior leadership stakeholder, both internally and on the client side?
I will focus a bit more on the client side. Internally, I think there is a lot to be said for the people that you work with and how you manage the balance of those relationships, which I think Nina was touching upon earlier. On the external relationships, it's really interesting. In the financial services, this sector in terms of the C-suite is actually quite small. So actually what you see is a circular economy of people moving from one position to another. And so in the end of the day, irrespective of which company you're working for, you're working with the same people. And so I think personal relationships are hindered upon a number of factors. One is obvious, which is trust. And so you must have had some experience or some like-mindedness between each other in order to have resonated towards the same target. And I think at the end of the day, a lot of that is premeditated on your successes together and your commitment to each other to achieving a goal. And I think that's the one thing that I really focus on. But interpersonally, I think it's important anyway to get to know each other. We're all humans at the end of the day, and we experience the same challenges. I mean, I've got 2 children. There are other women in this panel who have, you know, not even outside of the panel in the C-suite, who have children. We have to balance careers, children, outcomes, motivations, purpose, all sorts of things. And if you can't connect, I guess, at that level, it feels a bit like a superficial relationship. So I think it's important to actually acknowledge yourself. And I think one of the things that we did from a consulting point of view is tell a little bit about yourself and be happy to be vulnerable. And I think Nina has been quite vulnerable on this call, kind of giving her personal stories, you know, and saying the challenges she's had in certain conversations or things that have resonated. And these are the ways in which you kind of build that interaction with one another. But again, a lot of that is also premeditated on how you achieve success together, because that builds foundations of trust and mutual respect, and that you've got each other's back. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thanks, Lilia. Stay with me for a while because we have an interesting question from the audience. So the question is, which skills beside the technical delivery ones have been crucial enablers as were you taking over the first senior role?
I think my broader understanding of the business objectives and the politics behind, you know, how organizations are being run, because oftentimes we think about the technological execution or the process execution or the governance and the policies and all these things we need to adhere to. At the end of the day, none of that matters. We talked about relationships, that's super crucial, but also the observation of relationships and intermingling between, you know, interactions between different stakeholders and individuals that are actually driving what your intention is. And it's a complicated landscape. It's never one person responsible for one thing. It's usually an overlap of responsibilities for different people and different roles. So understanding that complex landscape took me some time to build up and to be able to navigate. Because everyone is driving their own agenda. And until you understand the agenda, you can't play in the chess game. And that's the one thing that you need to be part of the game, but first you need to observe the game in order to make change. And a lot of the management is by influence, Raffaella. It's not direct management. You're not directly responsible for an outcome, but you need to bring a collective of people on the journey with you, and they need to all understand the purpose behind that journey. And so growing into a leadership position, this was, managing by influence was another soft skill that I had to build. So EQ, not necessarily IQ. EQ, massive factor. Grit, because it gets frustrating at times. And of course, managing by influence would be my three.
Thanks again. Shivani, you told us that you have experienced a pivotal shift in your career path. So the point and the question is, how did you manage to transfer the skills you have built in the early roles you covered to the technology industry?
Thank you, Raffaella. I think this is a good coincidence that this question is coming my way, because it's a section that I cover in my book as well. And the section is titled that you're allowed to uncover new paths. So let me give you a little bit more context on my journey. I think a lot of people don't know that the beginning 3 to 4 years of my career before I moved into tech was actually in the fashion industry. I was designing glamorous swimsuits and working with top designers. I have seen my work on fashion runways. I've seen some of the top Bollywood celebrities walk in my clothes. I've had the opportunity to be in a very glamorous environment. I've worked with brands like Victoria's Secrets, Marks and Spencer's in their products. So it's been a very different, very glamorous world. And at that point, and very early in my career, I started receiving a lot of success within a very niche industry within fashion. And I realized that actually this doesn't sit, I was like when we start studying something and when we enter the world, we're so fresh, we have all these notions that are maybe not very aligned with our values of how we want to perceive the world, and it evolves, right? And I'm a very idealistic person, and I choose to stay idealistic in my career, and I hope I will be able to sustain it. And one of the values was, hey, the values being propagated by fashion industry of fast fashion and consumerism is not aligned to me. I want to find another path, right? And to come back to your question, how did I make the switch from a fashion industry to the tech industry? Well, let's be honest. We are all in a consumeristic society. We all operate in capitalism, and we are all in the business of selling products and selling services. So I know this might sound a little bit strange when I say that the fundamental knowledge of putting a product out into the market, I'm using the same fundamental knowledge within a tech environment. And what is that? It's the same processes, right? You have a product idea. You wanna start with your consumer study. You wanna do your, you interview the consumer, you do your research, you validate your product, you enter the product phase, you do iteration, and you go back and test the product, whether it's the right market fit, whether we were able to translate consumer requirement. Then you have to enter the stage of planning a product launch, marketing, legal, finance, right? The pillars of each industry. Business, you said, Raffaella, business is business, right? This popped up. And business is business in across most industries. So I think we're given this notion that these industries are isolated, but not so much so. Yes, once you have a fundamental knowledge within the industry, you need to layer it up with specialized knowledge. So, right, you have this generalist knowledge, basic knowledge that's transferable, and then you need an extra layer of industry-specific knowledge. So I learned to, Nina, you'll be surprised, I learned to code. As a designer, I had no need to, right? As a program manager, I don't need to, but suddenly now I find myself in an environment where I'm working with developers and I'm launching multi-million euros projects in different parts of the world, in Mexico, in Brazil, in Poland, and these products, I learned sort of learn to work with the architecture, understand how architects think and work, learn to work and testing codes, right? I got very familiar with Postman and testing codes and all of that. So do not undervalue your industry transferable skills. There are a lot of skills that are transferable, and not just in industry, in roles. I know personally engineers who are now product managers because they understand the product well, right? And then they take on new skills. And there is a question by Taryn, I think. He's like, Taryn said that she wants to be more involved in tech. And my golden rule is incremental consistency, taking out 1 hour each day to consistently build a product knowledge, blocking out 1 hour in your calendar to learn something new. And don't tell me that you can't do it, because I've written a book while having a full-time job, while delivering all these projects, by booking 1 hour in my agenda to just consistently show up and work towards a skill.
Thank you, thank you. Conscious of time, probably we are ready to move to the third pillar of our discussion. And I want to involve immediately Nina. The third pillar, Nina, you remember, is about the importance of personal skills. So to which extent the personal skill can affect our career, and how to balance the fact that we want to be human and authentic with the fact that we want to be in a senior role as well.
Yeah, I'll try to keep the answer short because of time. I am only where I am because of my personal skills. That's the answer. I think at the end of the day, as I said, we're all working for businesses, whether you're working at EY, whether you're working in a bank, whether you're working at a fintech company. And I think Lilia already mentioned understanding the politics of things. Politics only exists because people create politics. If someone's being cagey about something or doesn't want to speak about a subject, or that you have to get buy-in from them first, these only happen because people exist. We work as humans in a workplace. And so I do think interpersonal skills are incredibly important. Every day, I'm fundraising right now, right? And it's fascinating. We're doing a small roll-up vehicle for angel investors. Minimum check is 5K. And I kind of thought, who's going to write a check? I don't know. We'll see. We did this last time when we first fundraised, and we had so many people for the first time ever. Literally, this guy who I used to babysit his kids, over a decade ago, decided to write a 5K check because he just said, I think that you're incredible. I think that whatever you do, you will succeed and you will work hard because I know that you work hard. And I believe in your character. And so he wrote me a £5,000 check. Another guy who I've not seen in years just wrote me a £5,000 check because he's just thought, yeah, actually, I do think every time I've interacted with you has been pleasant, and I think that you can take anything on. So I think it shows up in very interesting ways. It shows up in the way that we network. It shows up in the way that we promote ourselves and others, and even the way that we interact in the workplace. And I'll just also wrap in, I know Sophie asked about imposter syndrome. Yes, of course, I do feel imposter syndrome. I don't know. I don't know a single woman that doesn't, but I do remind myself every single day that I'm here for a reason. And it's things like that when people look back and in your time of need, write you that check or put a good word in or leave you a LinkedIn, what is it that they call them? Referrals or note or something saying that you're brilliant. These are all things that are a great reminder that, we deserve to be where we are. And oftentimes it's due to personal skills more so than anything else.
Shivani, the next question is for you. How have your personal traits helped you in setting the ambition and the goals of your career, achieving these goals, but also how important they were to help you in managing the challenges you experienced?
Raffaella, can we call courage and wilderness personality traits or personal traits? Because I believe a lot of where I am and where I've come from comes directly from having this sense of adventure and choosing to navigate the world with courage. You know, as a South Asian expat who's living and working in France, where I don't speak, where I had to learn a new language to be accepted, where none of the traditional leaders look like me. I had to do a lot of, I had to exhibit a lot of courage to dare to ask questions, courage to just raise my voice, courage to knock on the boy's door and say, hey, hi, I'm here as well, include me. And also a sense of adventure, right? I think somebody said, how do you navigate, what is your experience in working abroad opportunities? I moved geographies, right? And I moved from South Asia to North Europe, very different culture, very different geography, and in a place where I don't know anybody, I have no support system. And only my sense of adventure, like carrying a backpack and saying, hey, I'm going hiking in the corporate world of North Europe, sort of let me come where I am. And that's what is important, a sense of courage and a sense of adventure to navigate territories that do not belong to you. You know, we talk a lot about high ceiling and how can women go to high ceiling. I guess we have to exhibit courage and navigate it with a sense of adventure. Be in rooms and tables where we are not traditionally there, and bring our sisters along, right? Come with our sisters, so build this sorority around it. That's what's helped me.
Thanks for your words. Last question is for Lilia. Lilia is a big question. I'm very interested in hearing your point. Is it true that the women are showing themselves as more introvert in their job, and that they don't like so much to speak up frequently? Let me say, maybe preferring to stay in the second row. And if it is the situation, which kind of tip you can share with these individuals in order to thrive in their career?
So thank you for the question. It is a loaded question indeed, and I'm sure I don't come across as an introvert, although maybe I am one. If I look at the women that I work with in top positions, I would say they're all quite decisive, quite opinionated, and quite forward with their opinions. And that's what made them successful, speaking up and being comfortable to the points earlier raised. And I think it's important, Shivani mentioned a very important point, is you've got to get used to the change. Frankly, a lot of us that are working within this industry find ourselves in different parts of the board or different parts of the world. I personally work across a massive time zone, and there's a different culture in the Middle East versus culture in UK versus the culture in, for example, Italy, and I've got to navigate that. And as part of that, all the women that I've come across the whole world, I have seen a variety, but actually most of the successful ones are absolutely not introverted. And you know what differentiates them? I'll tell you, it's personal confidence. That's all it is. Because if you don't speak up for what you believe in and put yourself forward because you have an opinion and you have something to say, and you don't give yourself the platform and you always wait for someone to open the door and give you the platform for that, I don't think that you're going to show the best and shine the best of yourself. So it's important to persevere, and sometimes you're going to get backlash and sometimes you won't be the right one around the table, but you'll learn from that and you'll brush yourself off, you throw it over the shoulder and you continue forward. And that's the important thing, is learning those lessons, learning those interaction points, and being okay with being vulnerable and being okay to put yourself out there. and you will find your space and you will find your niche. And I know there's a lot of worry. Just one final point. There is a worry that when women speak up, they will come across as aggressive, or they'll come across as strongly opinionated, and it's a tag or a label that they're going to have to carry with them. Frankly, most of those women that I see on those tables are strongly opinionated and they come across as aggressive, but so what? Because they get the job done and the outcome is right. I think you need to just find a balance on how to balance the interpersonal relationships, coming back to that whole point of EQ, but still be able to be passionate and allow yourself to be passionate around the topic. Because if you're not, how are you really going to reach an outcome and influence and motivate and manage a whole horde of people to believe in what you truly want to drive? So that would be my recommendation.
Thanks. Fully agree and full with you on this comment. Thank you. We have a couple of minutes left, so 20 seconds, no more each one. The topic is how to transform our leadership journey, our journey to leadership. Sorry. The most important tips you want to share with us. 20 seconds, please. Start, Lilia, start.
Sure, I will start. So 20-second tips. Please don't worry about being vulnerable and putting yourself out there. Make sure you invest time in looking at the wider ecosystem and interactions, and spend as much time as possible on your interpersonal relationships and your network, because this will carry you through in your career, both internally and externally.
Thanks. Shivani?
My number one tip would be future is now. There is no perfect timing or perfect moment coming in the future. Stop procrastinating whatever you're procrastinating. If you want that role change, start today. If you want to learn a new skill, start today. If you want to try an alternative portfolio career, start today. And operate with courage. I know that a lot of our geopolitics wants to instill fear, but I want to remember that future is now, and it's time that women start operating with courage.
Nina, your turn.
I echo everything everyone said. One just tip that has always worked for me: if you don't ask, the answer is always no. So if you don't ask for the promotion, if you don't ask to be on the project, if you don't ask someone to invest, the answer will always be no. So the worst thing that can happen is they say no, and that's it. And yeah, I think what Shivani said earlier, bring a sister with you, so we can all crowd the rooms of leadership at the very top.
Thank you. We have to close. I want to thank you very much for this fascinating discussion we had. I'm very happy to have been there with you. A great experience for all of us, for me for sure. Let me say that we will send the reply of this webcast to all the attendees by email. And don't forget to look at LinkedIn, where you can find the sum up of these interesting topics and tools we shared today together. Let me say thanks again to all our great leaders with me today, and have a nice day for all of us. Good luck for all of us. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.